Hi there. I'm Stephanie Mann at Safe Kids Now, and I'm here with an old friend. I met her probably 10 or 12 years ago when she called me and said she was very interested in working with kids. And over the last 37 years, Lisa Bolton has been an early childhood development that has been her field. So she's been a teacher, an administrator, a trainer, and a presenter. And she's been a divorced mother. And she's going to tell her story, which is not an uncommon story, unfortunately. But she has some ideas on what needs to change. And so let me introduce you to Lisa Bolton. And Lisa, please tell us your story about your daughter.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story. Up till 2016, I had what most people would consider a normal life, up compared to today's standards.
Right.
Uh, I was married for 26 years or 25 years, divorced, remarried, mother of two. We had our pets, our house, the yard. I everything was normal. And then in 2016, I learned that my then 22-year-old daughter, Carrie, was entering rehab for the first time. The short version of that is that I had no idea that she was using drugs, or at least I told myself that I had no idea at the time. Knowing today what I know now, I probably missed signs or chose not to see them. I lived in a different state at the time, but Carrie and I spoke all the time. When she was younger, she experimented with, alcohol with her friends, like we all did in high school. She smoked cigarettes. I should have seen or heard the signs and knew that she was in trouble, but I thought, like so many other parents, not my child.
Wow.
She would never use drugs until she did.
Mhm.
She had come down here. She was 26 years old at the time. She came down here to visit her stepdad and I. And on January 25th, 2019, at 5:11 a.m., I will never forget the time, I
Oh,
received a call that no parent should ever receive. And my daughter was gone. And
I'm so sorry.
thank
That's
you.
hard to fathom for all of us to lose a child. So difficult. So, well, I know you've learned a lot through all this experience. And why do you think young people turn to drugs?
Well, I can tell you, I do want to add one thing to that.
Okay.
Uh, Carrie died in 2019 in New Jersey.
Okay.
At the end of the 2019, there were over 3,000 other people in New Jersey alone
Wow.
that died from an opioid overdose, just like her. In her case, it was heroin laced with fentanyl,
Well,
which is very common. Fentanyl, carfentanil, and it's becoming worse and worse um, with
is
that.
this still going on today? This bad?
Absolutely,
We
absolutely.
don't even talk about it anymore. I don't
No,
hear
we
much.
don't.
I don't hear much of a conversation about fentanyl or opioids. Mm.
It's absolutely horrific. It is. The moms that are in the support groups down here with me, I would probably say that most of them, if not all of them, are cases of fentanyl poisoning.
Wow.
And it can be laced in anything. It's absolute a horrific epidemic. But you, Carrie was before I get into answering the question about the reasons,
Right.
I want to explain that the most common misconception
Mhm.
about addiction is that it is a choice. And I need to tell you that it's not a choice. Addiction is a disease.
Mhm.
My daughter was a straight A student basically her whole life. This is Carrie. Um,
Oh, she's
this is Carrie.
beautiful. Put it up a little bit higher. Yeah. Lovely,
This is my
lovely
sweet
young lady.
angel. She
Yeah.
was my best friend. She was my entire world.
Mm.
Um, so I want to explain to you that, or explain to everybody that, like I said, she was a straight A student basically her whole life. She attended dance classes. She moved into acting. She was a little bit of a risk taker. She loved things like roller coasters and hiking the Delaware Water Gap with her dad. She loved to read. She was a gifted writer. She was an environmentalist. She did yoga. She wanted to be an instructor, actually. She worked with autistic children, and in group homes. She was followed in my footsteps because she was in early childhood her entire life because I kind of dragged her with me. Um, she she fiercely loved her family. She was a 4.0 college graduate, magna
Wow.
cum laude with a BA in forensic psychology. Um, Sorry, my computer was reminding me something. She liked to use her degree and to psychoanalyze people, especially me. Uh, she she
Sounds
was
like a daughter to me.
she was great at that. Her favorite line was, "And what do you think about that, Mom?" She lived life by her rules, her way.
Mhm.
She was loved by so many. She would give you the shirt off her back, sometimes to the detriment of her own well being. And I could go on and on about my daughter, but she was an amazing person. Her addiction doesn't change that. And it certainly did not and does not define her. Like
No,
I said, addiction might start off as a choice, but then it takes the choice away. And it is
right.
definitely a disease. But I'll get back to that, and I apologize for all the ums.
No, no.
um, you
You're doing
asked
good. This
me,
is a very tough subject, and I really appreciate you sharing your message with others because
I
it's such an important message.
I appreciate the opportunity, and so would she, because it was so important to her, even when
Yeah.
she was in active addiction, to get this message out there. You asked me reasons. I'm asked a lot why by people that knew her because of who she was and knew her so well. Carrie made a choice one day, and that choice took control of her brain, and then it took control of her life, and then it took her life. The reasons would have been hers to share, so I don't discuss her reasons specifically, but I can tell you that I recently helped with the editing of a book called Not in Vain, and
Mhm.
I'm going to show you how thick that book is
Oh my,
to give you an
that's a
idea.
book.
This is a book. It's called Not
Yeah.
in Vain.
Okay.
It was Bobby Zemer, who also lost her daughter, Madison. Um, Something happens when you lose a child, you struggle to find meaning. So Bobby wanted to create something to honor Madison, but also that would help raise awareness. The
Right.
book is so thick because it contains over 160 stories by moms like Bobby and I who have lost their child or children to this epidemic. So the whys range from addiction due to prescription overuse and abuse to mental health issues. There were stories of abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual. Some used to escape family issues such as divorce, fighting within the family, and abandonment. Some were due to peer pressure. Because I've become involved with various groups, I've met mothers who have told me stories about sons and daughters and even spouses returning from military service, suffering from PTSD, who have succumbed to overdose.
I've heard those stories too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're sad. They're
Very
just
sad.
they're sad, and there were some that are not just kids. I mean, these were stories about adults in their late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s. They're There were stories told to me about daughters who were raped and turned to drugs, or pregnancies that they decided to end and then later regretted the decision and had such overwhelming guilt that they turned to drug use. There
So,
were,
so you think a lot of times this is about trauma in people's lives, right?
oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, no doubt.
And they don't know how to handle that trauma. So they
Right.
turn to
Also,
a drug to escape.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's just so many reasons that I could go on and on, and it all it all winds up being about the trauma. But I think it's also important to mention that I've heard many stories about relapse as well. It's
Mhm.
important to understand that you can think that they've been recovering for 10, 20 years, and then all of a sudden you hear that they've now passed away, and you think, well, they were clean for 20 years. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter because of the PTSD or the trauma or the trigger. It can happen, and all these moms have two things in common, though. They all thought, "Not my child," and if we only knew the signs or the things to look for, and that was why Bobby put that book together, also.
what a great idea, because you're right. We tend to ignore some things that we should be looking at. And if people understand some signs, maybe you can tell us what people should be looking for.
Yeah.
So give us some information about telling us what should we look for, or how can we help our kids, or because it happens at any age, whether you're a teenager or older, or have PTSD at an older age. How can we spot that?
Um, we have to raise awareness. We have to.
Okay.
I mentioned, uh, oh, I don't know, did I don't think I mentioned earlier. I think I wanted to mention earlier, and I forgot to, but I wanted to mention earlier that my daughter attended DARE in 5th grade.
Oh,
Um,
yes. I
it
remember
wasn't
that.
enough. It wasn't enough. There was no follow-up. There was no education, for the parents. I say that constantly when I talk to people. You
Yeah.
know, she was in 5th grade. There needs to be so much more. She remembers the cute officer that taught DARE. My son remembers Miss New Jersey presenting him with the award. They don't actually remember what they learned. There's, and I'm not putting the DARE program down. I'm just saying that there needs to be more. There was no follow
Right.
up with the parents. There was no, like sit me down as a parent and tell me what else do I need to go over with my child. You
Right.
know, we talked to like my ex-husband and I talked to our kids, and we said, don't do drugs, and don't use it,
Yeah.
and we thought, okay, we've done our job. But let me tell you, addiction doesn't care that your child went through DARE. He doesn't care that
No.
we raised them to know better. It doesn't care. um, there needs to be so much more, and it needs to happen now, because there's so many things that have changed. The drugs like fentanyl and carfentanil coming into the country illegally,
Mhm.
they're killing our children, and we're helpless to do anything about it. And it's causing all these other things, like we've talked about the sex trafficking, and all the foster care system, and all these kids, the
Yeah.
parents that are being locked up, and the kids that are being raised by their grandparents. My daughter wanted to raise awareness. I wanted to be standing next to her as she did that. And all that has changed now that she's not here is that now I just need to be her voice, and I
Absolutely.
still need to do it. So, I put together what I'm calling the Dandelion Project. And my vision for that is to educate our youth, to help and protect the children that are left behind, because,
Right.
they're the forgotten grievers. We have this attitude that, oh, they're young, they'll get over it, they'll bounce back. They don't.
No.
I've had this wonderful career of over 37 years in early childhood, and they don't bounce back. They're left to be raised by their grandparents. They're left to be put in the foster care system. What do you think is going to happen to them
Yeah.
because of what they're being exposed to? But I want this project to help and protect the children left behind. There needs to be education to the child care workers and the education and other caregivers. We need to provide support and aid and respite for the grandparents raising their grandchildren. And we need to continue support for grieving families, but especially for the siblings and the young children.
Let me ask you a question, Lisa,
Sure.
because you know that I'm a crime and violence prevention consultant.
Yes, I
And one
do.
of the things I think has really affected children greatly is the social isolation.
Hmm.
And when I say that, we used to have cohesive families, you know, we used to have cohesive neighborhoods where people knew each other. And there was a lot of education and check and balance on children's behavior when you have all these other adults in their life. Do you think that has something to do with children feeling isolated and maybe getting into drugs before they even think about it? I mean, it's their friends and they're having fun and they're drinking. And um, what do you think about that?
Oh, I do. I think that has a lot to do with it. I mean, when I was growing up, and I'm approaching my later 50s. Um, but it's an entirely different time. I mean, we grew
It
up in a
is.
time where, you're right. We looked out. My parents didn't have to worry. Everybody
Looked out
looked
for
out
everybody
for each
else.
other.
Yeah,
We were out. There was no cell phones. You were outside playing in the neighborhood. You weren't attached to the television. There wasn't a cell phone. You
right.
knew, dad pulled up the street, and like, oh, I got to get home. You respected. There was respect. Um,
Yeah.
there was discipline. Uh, it's a totally different time now.
Sure is. Sure is. You can see
You
all
had
the violence.
family dinners, I
Right.
get people now that, I don't know when the last time was that somebody actually told me they sat down and had a family dinner, like at the kitchen table.
Instead of in front of the TV.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, I remember those days.
So do
Well,
I.
any final words that you would, final bits of advice that you would give parents that might be helpful to them?
Um, I think what I would if there was something I'd like to have everybody hear was that I'm no longer just a grieving mom. I'm my daughter's voice, and we need to
Good.
raise awareness. We need to end the stigma. We need to promote empathy and advocacy, and we need to do those things now. Carrie will forever be my angel. She's going to forever live in my heart. She's forever going to be loved. She's never going to be forgotten. She battled with the disease of addiction, and she lost her battle on January 25th, 2019. My beautiful sweet girl is going to be forever 26 because of this horrendous epidemic that is costing hundreds of lives each and every day. It doesn't care who you are. It doesn't choose you because of race, religion, or background.
Right.
It will destroy your loved ones, and then it will destroy everything in its wake. It will take everything from your loved one. And when you think or they think it cannot take anymore, it will take their lives and your sanity, maybe even your soul. We
Yeah.
must raise awareness. We must stop the stigma. We must stop your shame. Yes, it can be your family member, your friend, your neighbor, your child.
Yeah.
Every child is someone's child. They all matter. Carrie is my child. Her life mattered. Her death matters. It's not going to be in vain. We can make a difference, but we
Absolutely.
can't do it alone.
You know, Lisa, I'm so grateful that you shared your story about your daughter because it's such an important story to tell because people are, they need to know that this can happen to anybody. And thank you so much for sharing your story tonight. And you take care of yourself too, okay?
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Okay. Thanks for being with me. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.